You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Proteum Machining. And this week, I am very happy to welcome Nick and Skylar Squillace of NS Precision. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Dylan. Good. How are you doing?
What's up,
I'm
Dylan?
doing well.
Nice to see you.
I think a lot of the listeners probably know who you guys are, but for those who don't, what is NS Precision? What do you guys do? All that good stuff.
So NS Precision is a small family-owned company. My brother and I, Nick and Skylar, it's in the name, NS. You know, we tried to go for the simplest name possible. We weren't really tied up in what it had to be. And we're a small machining company. We got one employee and we do everything from motorsports, aerospace, defense,
Some aftermarket
parts, and just been growing over the last 2 years. So
Awesome. Yeah, it's been so cool to see how far you've grown so quickly on Instagram. I mean, I remember like you guys had that old robo drill and now it's,
We actually still
fancy
got that
Haeberles and all kinds of stuff. So
in the garage.
yeah, exactly. So I guess let's get into your backstory. I don't know which one of you wants to go first, but I think both of you kind of have a very interesting background to get into manufacturing. So, whichever one of you wants to go first, how'd you get here?
Yeah, like had absolutely no idea what an end mill was, even, what a machine tool did. But we were really big into RC cars and computers and
building things
building
of various
things in
sorts.
general. We had every type of ATV, golf cart, go-kart. And our dad kind of just like let us run free. So we're just, gave us a lot of free range to just like learn, fail, pick it back up, do it again. So our first forte, even our first machine was in, we were just leaving
2009.
2009. So we were just leaving high school into college and we got a little Probotics CNC router and we're making little drone parts in our townhome our freshman year of college. And that was just kind of like beer money. It's fun to learn. And there was, very little CAM software back then. There was, I think the 2.5D version of HSM Works had just come out. And so that was kind of like our forte into manufacturing, was just kind of fun things in the garage and just wanting to do things with our hands. So.
And what'd you guys go to school for? Because I think that's kind of sidelines you into what you're doing now as well, right?
Yeah, so had kind of no idea we wanted to eventually get into racing, but wanted to do something mechanical, wanted to do something, just a combination of, manufacturing, design, kind of close the loop, get to see the full process. And ended up going to school in Jacksonville, Florida, and at a University of North Florida, studied mechanical engineering. So we were both in pretty much all the same classes, so it made it really easy. We just split up the work and kind of do, take the rest of the time to just play in like the machine shop at the school. And we were involved in Formula SAE. So, but both of us went to school to actually run track at the University of North Florida. And Skylar had ventured out one day because he was injured and went into the SAE club. And that's kind of how we got involved in the motorsports side of things.
Very cool. Yeah, SAE seems like a through thread on a lot of my guests. I think a lot of the ones that made it through college because of associations with that. Yeah, exactly.
It's like all this theoretical stuff, and then you don't get to like apply any of it. That's not fun,
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why I did so poorly my first 2 years. I was like, I hate this. Like, this is so boring. I'd much rather, go out and party or like just not go to class because why do I care? There was none of that why.
Exactly.
And it seems like Formula really helps with that.
That was our first 2 years, man. We spent, all the track guys were probably on academic probation because we spent most of our time, fooling around the dorm playing Donkey Kong 64, doing, stuff you weren't supposed to be doing. And then, I was actually on academic probation for a while, and I finally got into Formula, and that's actually where I started doing better in class because both of us really had like some hands-on way of applying the stuff we were learning in class to a club or some type of physical object. And then, that's how we got into machining was, how do you make these parts you design? So
yeah, it was just really like a struggle to learn. Like until we got into mechanical design, our professor was the head professor over the SAE team. So he was always talking about it during class. And then Skylar eventually ventured in there, and that like really sparked our interest in, wow, like, what we're learning in the classroom is not just theoretical stuff. Like we can actually put it to work. And that's really where we discovered machining in general.
So was it the machining of the parts for the Formula car that really sparked that off, or was there anything else in college?
Yeah, Nick, we had designed a couple of different parts for the car, and we had no way of making them. We're at our university, we had a very small machine shop. It was like 2 little manual bridge ports and a lathe. And I was actually in there, and I was making parts for our drone that we had, like the little router for, and we were cutting parts. And I was on the lathe turning a couple little shafts down to go into a bearing, and one of the guys approached me, and he's like, "Hey, come check this out." So eventually, became team captains of the Formula team there. But we first started working there, and we were designing everything from like the steering gearboxes to suspension parts, and someone had to make these, and they had just gotten like a little educational mini mill that was sitting in the corner. It had been sitting there for like probably 5 or 6 months. No one had touched it, and we had to make some little adapters for the sprocket to the rear differential. And it was like, nobody can make these because they're like, they're not just prismatic parts you can throw in the lathe and turn them. And Nick went in there, grabbed the manual. We went home that night, and he just read through the whole thing. And we went in the next morning. We're like, "Hey, can we use this thing? Like, no one's sitting over here using it." So we actually, over the next week, set it up, started running it, got coolant in it, and cut our first chips, even though we had no idea what we were doing.
So many mistakes along the way too, because like we don't know anything about a real mill, like what coolant to buy, like that type of stuff.
Yeah, you jump from a Probotic CNC router that like you can push on and flex it like 1/4 inch to like an actual mill is a big jump. But I remember we got the parts made, and we made it to competition that year. So that was kind of the first steps to getting us hooked. And I think since then we were just like, man, we like this very hands-on approach to being an engineer, right? Like you get to see a part all the way through the process.
That's super cool. So then I guess where, I think one or both of you went on into motorsports. Did you kind of know from Formula SAE, you were like, this is where I need to go?
Right. So from
both of us, technically.
Yeah, both of us. So from Formula SAE, we eventually started working there at a small startup drone manufacturer. They make tethered aerial platforms for like defense, and so it's a fiber optic tether, and they've got like power and data over the tether. And so we did all the design work for that, and it was cool because we did get to manufacturing some parts for that, but most of it, we're outsourcing it to different shops, and that's kind of how we started to learn like to work with different shops and how that whole process developed. And we wanted to, like, we enjoyed that, but we really wanted to work in motorsports. And that's kind of how we got the jump. We were just talking to our mom one day, like we really want to work in motorsports. And, and she had a friend that she knew from back in the day that worked in the sunglass industry. And they sold sunglasses to all of the professional motorsports teams in IndyCar. And one of his contacts is Stefan Johansson, which was a ex Formula One driver, and he was going to be at the event. So they're in Jacksonville. So they have the Daytona 24, which is a 24-hour race in Daytona every year. And it's a series called IMSA, which is International Motorsports Association. And also there's WEC, which is World Endurance Championship. So all of those cars will race at Daytona if they're homologated for the international circuit. And so she helped us get tickets to this event, and we're just like, okay, we're just gonna go and like bring our resumes and just hand out as many resumes as possible and just talk to people. And that was probably like one of the best things we've ever done just in our career path, is just like put yourself out there. You're gonna get a lot of no's. It's just, especially if you want to work in the motorsports industry, the first person we talked to when we were handing out resumes was, hey, unless you know somebody here, you're not going to get a job. And it was like, that was kind of like a shoot down, but you just kind of have to like throw it off the side and say like, okay, now I'm going to hand out 49 more resumes to the rest of the teams. And I would say 90% of those were no's. And, finally, like halfway through the event, we met up with my mom's friend, and he introduced us to, which would be our now boss, Bill Riley, who was there. They had just won the bid to be the one of the 4 manufacturers for the new LMP2 program that was going to be replacing the then prototypes in Daytona.
How cool. Yeah, I mean, it's so cliche to say, but like when you're getting no's, like all you need is one yes. Like it doesn't matter if it's 100,000 no's. Like you just need one yes, and
You
so
just
like
have
you
to
just keep
accept
going.
it. It's like, you're gonna get no's. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like to close this circuit, I think he had the same experience I did. I went to I was interviewing with some NASCAR teams, and just trying to get my name out there. And there's it's kind of a lot of egos and stuff in NASCAR that is, back in the day, it was like known for like a lot of big egos. And I remember going into my interviews, like 7 people, like the head engineer for aerodynamics, the couple of the simulation guys, and then the team principal. And he's like, well, I got, like first thing he said to me was like, I got 32 more interviews after you, and unless you're the next best thing since sliced bread, you're probably not gonna get a job here. I was like, wow, this guy's a dick. Yeah. And I was like, I don't ever want to work in NASCAR, but yeah, just funny how that worked out. And then I ended up that's actually my full-time job, man. So,
and it's kind of funny, the guys we were on the interview with now work next door, like literally 50 feet down.
Yeah, the building next to us. It's hilarious.
No way.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So are you both doing the full-time part-time thing, or
no? So it's Nick runs the shop full-time, and we have one employee, a friend of the family who also runs one of the machines. And then I'm here on nights and weekends doing as much as I can do. I keep the Haeberle cell fed and running, and then in the summers I'm off a couple days a week, and so I'm in the shop.
Okay. So connect these stories for me. You guys both get what most car guys would think is like a dream job in motorsports. You're doing cool shit. What made you, want to start your own shop?
Man, what? Well, I guess there's a lot in between there.
Okay, hit me with it.
Yeah, so actually, you were the first. Like Nick actually got a job at Riley Technologies, and I think
2017.
we had given them a resume, had like done a phone interview, and like called, and we didn't think we were gonna get any word back. And then 2017 like rolls around.
8 months later, I think, we were still working at the drone company. We get just like on a Friday, I get a call. So we had gone up there, interviewed. 8 months later, we're just like, okay, we just like forgot that one. It's not gonna happen. 8 months later, I get a call on a Friday. Hey, can you be here on Monday? We need you to start now. So like literally just dropped everything, packed all my stuff, lived in a hotel for like 2 months, and like one of those like long-term stay hotels. And so I wanted any job in motorsports. I was like, hey, you don't have a design position? Like I will run a mill, I'll run a lathe, like I'll figure it out. And during our interview, the only thing they want to know is like, hey, what kind of parts have you made? There was no like technical. It's just like, hey, show me what you've done. And you can't really show me what you've done without experience like Formula SE or like a car project or something in your garage where it's like you have something physical to show these people. So like for people like trying to get into motorsports, like it's more about what you've done than the classes you've taken.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So like picked up, left everything. They had just gotten the bid to get that car manufacturing, the manufacturing position for that job, or for that whole series.
And 7 cars was the initial bid. And Nick moved up there, I think, like immediately. He packed up his Subaru and like all his stuff and was gone on Monday.
Just one bag.
I'm sitting there like, okay, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't know. So I was waiting around for a little while, and then he went up there, got trained. Like you can tell about how you got.
So
trained.
I went to Mazak in like I had no experience with Mazak. Went to Mazak in Kentucky, did the whole training on the Mazatrol. They have like at the time they had 2 Mazak like longer bed machines, mainly doing like prismatic parts, and then all the like 5-axis stuff is all outsourced. So they had that and a quick turn lathe. Eventually, machined most of the parts for the car, took over both sides of the shop to do the turning and the milling, and started to run the shop. And then they needed a design engineer. I was like, I got the perfect guy for you guys. And so yeah, Skylar was hired probably 3 months after I got there. And then, he was in the design office. I was down in the manufacturing floor. So we're just like the feedback loop is like instant, because like we know like how each other think. And he's sending prints down to me. I'm like walking up and talking to him and going over Teams and chat and stuff. So I think that like really kind of proved ourselves in the manufacturing environment, and just the closing the design loop. We were able to iterate very quickly. And we're doing like large flat work,
wing uprights, suspension
um,
parts, and rockers,
some basic carbon fiber tooling.
Yeah.
They had like a large carbon fiber router there, so they have a full like carbon shop, pre-preg into either like a wrench shape tooling or a direct aluminum tool. So off the wrench shape, you make a carbon fiber mold, and then you lay up into the carbon fiber mold, and those have the same expansion rate. So then you get a more accurate part. But that's the thing is that machine shop, like it was a great experience because you're seeing so much variety, and it's so much work that is like, hey, we need this today by the end of the day, and needs to go in the truck. That it really like pushes your skills, and when you get into that type of environment, it's like a really good way to not only push yourself, but to like kind of learn by fire.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's like I think I heard somebody on the podcast once say this. It was like one of those jobs where you learn 10 years worth of experience in 2 years.
Right.
I think that's kind of how it was.
Yeah, you're drinking from the fire hose for sure. So how long did it take? Because again, that sounds just like a dream job. You're getting to iterate constantly, learning all this new stuff. How long did it take before you guys were starting to get a little antsy?
So
when COVID came around.
Yeah, probably around when COVID came around, like obviously all sports like across, every sector just dropped off the earth, and there was like nothing. So we were working on design projects still. I had moved up. So Skylar had left and went to NASCAR. I had moved up into the design office to take his place. And then eventually we're like, okay, well, is this going to last? We were designing a Trans Am car. So we had finished all the projects for the DPIs and the LMP2s. And then Multimatic, which is a very large company, took over all the projects. And like when you're working with a manufacturer like that, you have to be in a certain tax bracket to be like liable to even make the cars, because they got to know that you're going to be able to provide for all the customers.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was in the design office. They had asked me to go on the road and start doing data. I had like some small amount of data experience with Motec and I2 in Formula SAE. Immediately got thrown on a GT3 car, was traveling with the team. So it was kind of like, hey, we don't have work for you in design right now because we're not building any cars that are going to go race, but we're going to put you on the motorsports team. And as COVID ended and we started racing again, I was traveling with the team, doing data on one of the cars, and then just working with the engineers to essentially just like close the loop on data. And then, so while we were traveling, Skylar went out and found us a T14IA robo drill that was like somewhere in Arizona. We had it like shipped in. We were like, okay, we want something fun to put in the garage. And this was like just for hobby stuff. Like we had, we're like, okay, we're just going to bring it in there. We're in a rental home. We put it on a drop deck trailer after it comes off the long haul. We wait till 4 a.m. in the morning. We hook it up to Skylar's truck, back in the garage where all of our neighbors are sleeping in the HOA. And Skylar wires it up and we have it running the next day. And it's so just like, okay, we've never seen this before. This is like a cheap machine we can start making parts on, and it looks cool. Skylar wired it up and we had it running probably in a week, and we're like, okay, well, what do we do with this? Just like, and we live on a lake here in Lake Norman, and one of the big things on Wednesdays is a thing called Water Scooter Wednesday. So everyone takes their jet skis out to this island, and they set up buoys and a course, and everyone kind of like lets each other ride each other's jet skis, and it's fun. And one of our buddies who was the team manager there at the race team got us into that. And so then we just started making these like vintage jet ski parts, aftermarket parts, just to like meet a need on like Facebook groups. And it was just
that's
fun
how
to
I was
do.
introduced
And
to you guys, as I remember seeing a bunch of
Right.
those and the anodize and all
which
that.
is like, now we don't even do anything like close to that. But it was like a great learning experience. It's like, hey, like what kind of market do we want to be in? Like, what do we actually want to do? Do we want to have our own product line? Do we want to, do prototyping? Do we want to do production?
Right. Well, like I had no idea that you guys had gotten out of that market. So when I saw you got the Haeberle, I was like, damn, jet skis are really booming.
I feel like everybody, we don't post very much on Instagram, and I think that's probably part of the problem. It's like, I'd rather just post a story really quick and then it like disappear in a few hours. And I just like, we get so busy with work now, where we got at least 5 customers. So,
right. Well, and it's hard to post because I'm assuming because you have all these defense and ITAR and all that stuff. Like you're not able to post any of the fun stuff you're doing anyway.
There's other race team, like people who work for other race teams who follow us. We can't post any of that stuff. Like we do a lot of stuff for the motorsports side for my day job, and so a lot of the stuff is NDA
before we go
work.
on with NS though. Skylar, why did you leave to go into NASCAR? Because you just said earlier that you never had wanted to go to NASCAR. So what made you leave, doing LMP2 stuff and all that to go to NASCAR?
After that project had dried up and like a lot of the people had left the design office, and I was one of the last engineers, like there's 2 of us left. And, working with Bob Riley was probably, a really big gift in my career because he actually recently passed away in October. But, if you know anything about, like, if you ever saw the Ford versus Ferrari movies, it's about Carroll Shelby and the guys who went over and beat Ferrari in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And, Bob Riley's a big part of that story. And so it was like working there was a gift because it was a constant history lesson. And so I really didn't want to leave. Every day I'm getting a new lesson about, like, the Ford versus Ferrari movie, it's not accurate. The last scene where he puts the data system in the car. He's like, it wasn't that big. It was like fit in the size of your hand. Bob had worked. Him and Carroll Shelby were best friends, and he had worked on the design of the Mark IV, which is the one that went on to win Le Mans, and is featured in that movie. And so the J car. It was the development car after the Mark II, which the Mark II is the one that won 1, 2, 3 in Le Mans. And that was a car that was developed by Ford and Lola.
and they wanted to do like when Henry Ford II went to buy Ferrari, and Enzo said no. They were like, okay, we're gonna go all American. We're gonna beat the crap out of these guys, and on their home turf. That's when they contracted Bob at his company. He had moved to a company called Carcraft, which is essentially like the Skunk Works of Ford Motorsports. They did all the like background testing, and then they could essentially shuffle all their R&D time onto Carcraft. And Carcraft had like a super small, like super talented group of designers, and they would just like iterate like crazy. So the Mark IV was actually supposed to go in the place of the Mark II, but they had issues with aerodynamic downforce, and um, then eventually Ferrari came back and beat the Fords in Daytona right after like what's featured in that movie. So they swept Daytona, and then they kind of just gave Carcraft. They're like, hey, like here's all this R&D money. Like we need you to give us a win.
Amazing.
Yeah, so working there was always a history lesson, working for Bob and Bill, and it was really hard to leave, but COVID come around, and it's like, I'm the only person in the design office, and even though there's so much history there, and it was cool working for a small family company like that. I just feel like I felt like I need to move on to something bigger and better, and so I started putting myself out there and looking, and was interviewing with teams like in the IMSA series, WEC, even Formula One, and so the best opportunity at the time came up was at Hendrick Motorsports, and they ended up hiring me in 2018 to go into the design office. So we had about I think it was a packed design office at the time. It was about 24 or 25 designers.
Oh wow!
And yeah, so joining that company actually was like the next, it was a big blessing because it really grew me as an engineer and as a person. And it's come to be a place that I love, and working there. I've been there for 6 years now, and it feels like a snap of the fingers, like it flew by. That's how you know you're at the right place. So, and I always said I would never work in NASCAR, and I don't see myself leaving anytime soon, but I think, there is a time where, I'll have to give it up to pursue our other goals with our business. And, yeah, here we are today.
Okay. Yeah. So then, yeah, back to the story. You're making jet ski parts. Where do we go next?
So we got to a point, I think during the pandemic, where we were like, hey, we either need to go and get a shop and do this full time, or we need to give it up. And so, like I had actually gotten partially laid off, and then Nick got laid off, and we're like, hey, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity. We're just going to go. Like, I went and got a job at Hendrick, and, Nick, we're like, hey, we're just going to go all in. And so, and like seeing guys build shops like the Saunders, and the Grimsmos, and even Juan, like, we went to college with Juan, and seeing him to where they're grown to today, it's pretty impressive. And we were seeing everybody start shops. We're like, man, why don't we just jump in the water with both feet and like start a shop? So we got a small space over here. It's about 1,000 square feet. Part like the back corner of this one shop, and we were able to work a good deal with our landlord. He's a CEO of Champion Tire, who provides all the tires for NASCAR, and he saw it in us to, hey, like these guys are trying to start their own thing. And we had a customer who we had just been growing with, doing aftermarket parts, and we were like, hey, now's the right time to really get a shop. So we got the shop, we got a new machine, we got the long bed robo drill, and we were making parts for that one customer as well as some other customers, and just kind of making ends meet. And then eventually, things grew. We ended up adding more customers. We're doing a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 work for military stuff. And so that's kind of where we started to grow. And last year we ended up buying the Haeberle to really offload a lot of the production work that we had grown into. And then from there, we're we're looking to expand even more just with some of the new customers.
Yeah,
That's
in
amazing.
2022, I decided to go full time, and that was just like, you can't kind of like dabble one foot in the other. You really need to like put all your effort in. As soon as we went full time, we like quadrupled our revenue, and it was like Skylar actually like fronted my salary for a while, and it was like, he's like, I've got it, like just go, like make it happen. It was like, I think 3 months later, like I was already replacing my salary. So, like you just have to like, even if you can, like, if you're looking to jump into something like this and you're in a day job, like build yourself up like enough buffer and then just go for it.
Yeah, it's crazy how much more happens when you're full time.
Yeah. I mean, from experience, right? Like when you were dabbling between your day job and your now job, I'm sure you guys are doing like orders of magnitude better.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We would be nowhere near where we are now had I not jumped in full time, because I really thank one of my friends, Kirby, because he was the one who really, really pushed me into it. Like he called me up. It was maybe 9 months before I actually went full time. And he runs a fairly successful business, and he was like, dude, what does it take for you to go full time? Like, I'll pay you. I'll like give you a short-term loan. I'll do what, like, go full time now. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to quit today, but like, all right, point taken. I'll start down that road. So yeah, it's scary, but man, it's so worth it. So worth it.
Yeah, we just thinking about how scary it was. We had some months there. We're like, man, are we going to be able to make the bills next month? Like those type of scary months. And I think just learning to deal with cash flow. We had no idea what we were doing. Make sure we have terms with all of our suppliers. Make sure that we're getting paid on time or taking down payment on some of the work that for these larger production orders, because you can spend a lot of money like in material, and it's like they have a 30-day, like we've even pushed some of them to get a 60-day terms on material, because it takes a long time to make all these parts. And so, you're not getting paid till those things are shipped and your terms are up. So, taking down payments for material and on these larger orders really helped. We didn't understand that in the beginning, but we kind of figured it out as we went.
Oh yeah. You have enough, weeks or months where your bank account is dwindling and you're like, I got to change something. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some questions. We've got a ton of great ones. From the Patreon, Doug asked for all three of us, upsides and downsides of paperless parts, especially common misconceptions that shops could have when they're considering adopting that type of automation. So you guys use paperless as well? I double checked on your website because I was like, I think they do.
Yeah, in February, first week of February of this year, we hopped into paperless. I asked, Juan is also using it, and just kind of asked around the community, hey, like, what do you think of this? Like, what has it done for your business? And, there's obviously the onboarding process, which is going to take you probably a month to get kind of up and going. But, there are some like really big benefits to using it, is like building out templates for certain types of work. One, just like minimizing the amount of total clicks you have to do is like crazy. So we were doing everything in Excel spreadsheets and filling out things by hand, and instead of just
one part at a time.
And especially if you have like a family of parts, they're all the same type of material or they're just slightly different. You can just copy the template across all the parts. It just makes it so easy to get a quote out the door. And like these typical package size we see, at least on a lot of the defense work, is anywhere from like 30 to 150 part numbers.
Jeez.
So it's like, okay, we can't do every single one of these, like just brute force it. So that was really the big leader into getting into this. And it does, like, I will not say like it doesn't have any faults, but it is like a massive benefit on time savings. We're getting a quote of 150 parts out in like a couple hours instead of, it taking 3 or 4 days for us to quote. So, and that's huge. Like if you can get it back to them the same day, they're like, dang, these guys mean business. Like we'll just go ahead and give them work because we know like we're going to get the parts on time if they're going to get us a quote back this quickly.
Oh yeah. Well, and people just want to place an order. Like I
Right.
think most people are familiar with nowadays just like buying something on Amazon. And it's like the closer you can be to that, the
they
better.
got the syndrome, you know?
Yeah. The syndrome.
Yeah. And I would completely agree. I think like personally, I don't find their interrogation to be like all that revolutionary. I very often am tweaking cycle times and things like that in there.
Yeah.
But it's all the other stuff that they've built out around it. You know, the part viewer is great. The collaboration stuff is great. Being able to send an e-quote that like I can see when they've seen it. Like I love I love that when I'm talking to an engineer and I'm like, oh, so you saw the quote? Like, what do you think? And they're like, how do you know? I'm like,
it's like, okay,
I know.
Now it's time to reach out.
I don't know if I'm creeped out or not. Like,
yeah, it's all that stuff. Like I think they've built out a very good ecosystem around the stuff, around the quoting itself.
Yeah. For some of our repeat work, it's been pretty good because it's just like easy to develop a new quote, like, or like a variation of the quote, like a customer wants, like 300 of a different anodized color, just quickly changing that and then sending it out, or just sending the new work order from the same quote. That makes it very easy. We did have like quite a few issues with, like you get one file, customer wants 4 different colors of anodize, like you don't want to have to go in there and make like, part number A-red, part number A-black, and then go back in and redo all that. So they actually, kudos to them. They actually went in and edited the final confirmation screen so you can actually see all the different colors in your description. So you just like toss in your description, copy paste for each new version. Cause like the final, like what you're shipping, is what's really critical on the confirmation screen. And we were having issues where it was like, the only thing that would show was the part or the step file name. And then you have to like pick based off of like quantities, and then we were getting them wrong. So like the customer was getting like an invoice for blue instead of black, and that was just but they took care of it, and their dev team was like a week turnaround on that, so it was good.
So actually you brought up a very interesting question I wanted to ask is, how did you get into anodize, and why did you decide to keep it as you grew out of the jet ski stuff? Because like I understand for jet ski, everybody wants the flashy retro color to match their bike, like, but now you're doing defense, you're doing all this stuff. I imagine there's a lot more paperwork that goes along with it. So what made you guys keep doing it?
So we actually don't still do it. We do it for very small batch work, but there's an opportunity cost associated with doing your own anodize. And as you grow as a shop, you realize that, hey, like my time is either, valuable running machines or loading parts, or like, where's my time really valuable? And so a lot of the stuff I was doing in my after hours and time away from work, and it's not really costing the business a whole lot, but if we put numbers to it and we're like, hey, there's a lot of costs associated with this. So we started outsourcing all of our production work. We have 2 shops that we work with that pick up weekly. One that goes up to High Point, and then one that goes down to South Carolina. And they're both really good anodizers. We had to work on them hard to make sure that the quality stays up. And but I think the best part about doing our anodize early on is it turned out from a hobby to doing like 1,000 parts by hand. It was just not really sustainable. And I think that's what people don't understand is you can quickly like spiral out of control when you're spending more time anodizing than you are machining. Right. So for us, it was about keeping the main thing. And we're not anodizers, we're machinists. So
how'd you go about training your anodize houses in your quality standards? Because I imagine that's like a blessing and a curse of having done it yourself in a cosmetic fashion. Is your guys' standards must be through the roof.
Oh, it's
and how to
crazy.
get there.
It's hard to get everyone up to our standard too. Skylar like really set the bar, like did a ton of research, essentially categorized all the potential defects of every single step of the process whether it be like, hey, this is a potential racking defect. This is a potential defect from the angle on the rack relative to where the cathode is sitting. You could get shading of parts based on where another part
rack together
is like in front of another part and facing the cathode. From racking all the way to like degreasing, rinsing, the amount of rinse steps required. And we've created, that's like one of the steps we take on every job now. We've added to our NS Precision workflow a contract review. And in the contract review, there is what we need. So obviously there's print review. You need to see what type of process they want. So they'll give you like the RAL number of the color, and then like the shade, what shade is acceptable. And then you have to set the standard, and then make sure your anodizer can actually meet the standard. And then verify what kind of processes they have for checking that to actually verify they're in the color range, whether it be a
shade sample. Like we'll do, like with one of our anodizers, we have, since we're doing thousands of parts that need anodized, and you can't, an anodizer really can't hold a shade. They can only hold a range of shade. It's not going to be perfect every time because the tank chemistry is changing with time. Every time a load goes in and out of the tank, you've taken dye out of the tank. It's now the concentration has changed, even if the tanks are 800 gallons. So we spent a lot of time down at the anodizer working with them on, hey, like what is the bandwidth we can reliably assume that you're going to give us parts back in. And so we've had them run a full range of parts, like 9 parts, and each one is a certain shade. And the line workers will actually take those and then compare them to the rack as it comes out of the dye step and then out of the seal steps. Sometimes you'll have to over dye to, you'll have dye bleed in the seal. So you'll to get to the right color shade, you'll have to really gauge that. And so they have that sample set with them when they're on the line. Developing that took us a couple months, like we've done everything from like a very light, fast red that can be outdoors. In Arizona, like, it's the highest UV index in the country. So it had like most of our customers are on like overland vehicles, and, how do you make a red that doesn't fade? So there's an iron oxide based red that we over dye, and we do like a duplex seal and a couple different things that we've actually developed on our own little line and with the dye suppliers to actually come up with the right chemistry and the right parameters so that we can get reliable color.
So that's where some of the benefit of doing your own line actually is like, what to tell the anodizer, because they're going to do whatever they want to do unless you tell them what to do.
Right. And so how did you approach them though? Because I would imagine most shops, if you brought them this giant document of all the ways they can fail, they would just say, just get the hell out of here. We don't want to deal with you. We got customers that are not as needy as you. So how did you approach them successfully?
One of our shops up in High Point, he's a little more like laid back, guys, a small family company that runs a line up there. And we send him like, we have those like Orbis totes that open and like foams that go in with all the parts and the documents that go on top into like a slip color card that goes on the outside that says the color. And he saw all this stuff. He's like, oh, what is this? And but we finally got him on the same page, and with working with the dye supplier and him, like, hey, this is not unachievable. It's just you have to change some of the parameters about the way you do things. And it was just you got to go there and get in person. If an anodizer's like racking your parts wrong or ripping your parts off the rack and you're getting scratches, like that's a kind of a negligence issue. You got to address that right away. And then when it comes down to like the color range and dye and all the parameters that you've set, you've got to make sure that you've really talked it over with your anodizer and been able to make the sample cards and work through all those issues. And it took a while, like it took months of work, but it's now to a point where it's acceptable for our standards.
Did you offer them more money per lot though? Or like,
Yeah,
I guess what incentive do they have to work with you, and how did you make that work?
some of the like where we developed the like a really light fast red dye, we worked with the anodizer up there. We do pay more per part for that, but we pass that on to the customer. And so it's not really, it's a lot of work to do that because it's extra steps in the process. It's they're running a custom dye that they didn't run on their line before for us, and it's only for our parts. So we went ahead and just said, hey, we'll pay you for the tank as long as you keep it open for us, and we're sending them parts every week. So it's really like an investment. But if that's what your customer wants, then we like to kind of do everything we can to make the customer happy.
Awesome. I love it. Doug's other question for all of us was, how much of your multi-axis work is 3+1 or 3+2 versus full 5 simultaneous?
Nick can answer that.
Yeah, I would say everything is like pretty much 3+2. There's not many scenarios where you need to like rotate both axes at the same time, unless it's some like tricky feature that's like undercut or requires a different tangent point on the ball mill to get to, or it's like a swarf cut. But just like very rarely do we see that. Most of the time we're doing 3+2 and then passing on the final op to one of the support machines. So one of the older machines or the other long bed robo drill. And that seems to be our best workflow because one, it like splits up a lot of time, but like if you have multiple setup stations on your other machine, you can flow down 2 jobs at once. It's just not every part is also like a 5-axis part. That's one of the things that we struggle with is like we want to put everything through the Haeberle just because it's so easy. You just throw a block on there, let it hit every feature, and then tab it off. But on the smaller, thinner parts for like we do a lot of like drone parts for defense, and we've recently gotten these parts that have 12 dimensions that are ±1, and it's just like you have to deal with thermal growth and the Z column growing as you heat up over time, and then so that's like I don't see like a whole lot of full 5, like unless it's on a mold. Or what about you?
I think I do it out of I do a fair bit of full 5. A lot of it's like deburr. A lot of it is to save from setting up a different tool. So like I'll do a lot of collision avoidance full 5 just to like, I've got a short ball end mill. Like we do a lot of stuff like 1 mil balls in 316.
Wow.
And it's like, if I can only have a 2XD neck
right.
and then do a bunch of full 5 stuff and keep it nice and stubby, that's what I end up doing versus like loading up a super long neck 1 mil.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great for tight features that are deep and tiny.
Yeah, it's just out of laziness, I guess, if I can to chalk it up to one word. I don't want to set up another tool, and but besides that, I think that like a lot of it is just prismatic. Like, drill this side hole, then tap this other side hole, and it's a lot of 3+2 as well, though. So Doug's other question was for you guys, and this was actually something I think I wanted to get into, and a lot of people are confused and want to know more about. You guys are ITAR and DDTC certified. How did that work out? Did you need it for your current work? And then what other certifications and registrations are you considering, and why?
So, especially with like a lot of the defense work right now, we have we're still working on the CMMC level 1, at least to be the first 17 controls to make us fully compliant. But that's why we say compliant instead of certified, because like certified would be like, hey, we have a third party auditing us to confirm that. So we try and like go through and make sure like, hey, we do have like the cleanliness of controls and the way we control data. But we don't do a whole lot of ITAR, like CUI or handling documents that require that kind of compliance. Most of the stuff we're doing for military work is like support equipment. We do a lot of tooling for weld fixtures and things, and not all of that stuff requires us to be ITAR certified, but we still have the certifications. We update them yearly.
What about DDTC? Because I had never heard about that one. What is that?
DDTC is just like the Director of Defense Trade Controls. This is just like where you go to do your ITAR certification. It just means like, hey, we are registered with DDTC, and then you are either ITAR compliant or not.
Okay, so technically, if you're ITAR certified, you're also DDTC?
Correct. Yeah. They're like hand and fist.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense. Because yeah, I saw it on your website, and I was like, man, I know a lot of these, and I don't know them.
Yeah, it's more like saying the same thing twice.
Okay. No, that's good to know. So CMMC is next. I know that one's very tough. Are you guys going after ISO or AS?
I think eventually AS, there's a lot of things we're putting in place first before we even start working on that. One was the quoting platform, 2 was ERP, 3 was documentation. We want everything documented, like at least leading into it. It's just so when we do the audits, everything is just a breeze.
Mm-hmm. What ERP are you guys using?
So we're actually beta testers on Infab. Juan and Blake and all those guys are really great. They the feedback loop is just like insanely quick. Like I'll tell Blake about like a potential issue or something, and they'll have it fixed within a couple hours. So but that has been also like one of the best things we've done for the company this year. So this was all leading up. All this stuff was leading off the previous year. We like 10x our revenue. We were like, okay, we have all this extra money to do. Like, do we buy another machine? We're really looking at the Haeberle C42, and that was like mainly for our mold stuff, our mold carbon direct tooling, and just decided like, hey, there's like so many other things we need to do for the company that like us getting a machine is actually gonna hurt the company. The first thing we need to do is, we needed like a very, I know Chris talks about it all the time, like a very accurate tool library. And I was on a phone call with Devin Dupuy, and he's like taking a look through our tool library. He's like, dude, this is dog shit. Like, you need to like clean this stuff up. And he's like, here's how you do it. You create a library for each machine. As you check tools in and out of the machine, whoever's operating the machine needs to update the library before they are finished with the job. That's just part of how the job needs to go. And then when all you guys are programming, everyone knows which tool is in which machine, and you don't have to like overstep each other in case like, 2 taps are broken and this guy's using like a specific tap, like M12x1, which is like not a super common. We only have a couple of those at shop. Like just knowing what's on each machine, because there's 3 of us programming. So, or like there's me here and I'm programming one machine, and then, or I'm running one machine, doing the runoff, then programming the other machine, but I need to know what's in the current machine. So I'm not like, because we share tools between all 3 machines just because we have all PT30 tools. And that makes it, really easy. And just cleaning up the libraries. Another big thing we did was invest in the paperless. The second thing was Infab, and then just developing a workflow of how a job needs to go through the shop. And all of that was driven off of a contract we were going to get. And we're like, okay, we need to like rethink how we're going about jobs that are coming in and out of here, just so the day-to-day, because we're going to be taking more work on with the same amount of people. We need it to be as streamlined as possible.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest issues was just managing that. It was like kind of all over the place. Nick was doing all the programming. We were like setting up and running the machines, but like there, everybody really needed to be programming. And so to have that organization is really important. And especially me, like I'm a novice. I'm not, Nick has more years of experience than I do. And when I'm programming, I'm using the old machine, or one of our guys, Ty, he's running the old machine. Like a lot of the 3-axis parts will run through there. and just having a process set up that we could follow, and making sure that, hey, when parts are finished, they're getting checked off in infab, and we know exactly where we are in the timeline.
Or what sub vendor they're at. Like, we have a lot of stuff that goes to anodize or oxide coating or some outside finishing process. So just knowing where everything is at in the timeline, and the whole team being able to know, like, and also our customer being able to know at the same time where we're at, and if we're going to be late on something. That's just been the biggest force multiplier for a shop. I think out of all the things we've implemented in the last year. Getting a new machine is great, but if you can't manage the additional amount of work that you're going to put through it, it's kind of, you're going to just drive yourself into a hole of stress, and who wants that? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I guess that brings us to Doug's last question, which was, does Fanuc deserve all the controller hate that it gets? You guys are clearly a fan.
I think it does deserve some of the hate that it gets, just because like when we first started using it, we're like, dang, this sucks. Like, but like once you just force yourself to use it for a long while, it's like, dang, this has a lot of power. And just, like the menus, like you have to go through, it's a pain. Like, that's like, you can't lie about that one. But it is like dead reliable. We have not had a single, knock on wood, we have not had a single issue with these machines or had to have them serviced since we bought them in 2022.
Yeah, since the new one in 22, and then the other one, we had replaced the spindle when we first got it, but since then, it's a 1998 TIA4. It's like one of the lighter castings that they made. And that thing still cuts, it'll hold half thou all day. So it's hard to get rid of that machine, especially when you got a new employee who you're teaching machining with no experience, because that machine has helped a lot, because, it's a cheap machine. You can make mistakes, and it's not a costly expenditure, right? If you crash a probe, it's a different story, or, something like that.
And on the newer side of things, the new HMI, everything is going to move towards the new HMI, which is really nice. Just cleaner menus. Like, a lot of us are like visual, so it's like, like large icons, and like, just easier to operate overall. It's very similar to the old side.
Like the Renishaw Go Probe I think it's even better than the Haas probing cycles. Yeah. So it's just as easy to use. We came from Haas, like that was the other machine, and then Nick ran Fanuc, or ran Mazak, and like, I'm sure Mazak kind of sucks compared to both of them. Yeah. But
okay, awesome. Also from the Patreon, Tim Paul, I think we already talked about what the most important thing you've done for your business. I would say, ERP and paperless and just systems. It sounds like systematizing things.
Oh, another one for our business is, we recently got Gemba docs. So, for all of our standard operating procedures and work instructions, we're essentially creating, what is like, a repository for work instructions for every single thing around the shop. There's a QR code next to like shipping and receiving. There's a QR code next to the laser machines. And there's a QR code next to all the different pallets. People can like just scan the QR code with their phone or the tablet, bring up all the pallet information, how to load the pallets in the machine, which program to use, which tools to use. So just systematizing everything, I think that's the most important thing you can do for your business. Especially if one day you want to sell your business.
I just looked it up. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's like for us, standard work instructions, especially for we have our first employee we hired back in August, and he's a friend of the family, but no real experience running any of this equipment. So, Nick and I, it's all tribal knowledge of how to operate the tumbler, how to like laser parts for this customer and ship them, and so now we actually made him make the Gemba docs, so he knows how to do it. And then, it's also like it's like accountability for your employees. Like, hey, have you read the work instructions on how to do this process? And so, there's really no excuse for, hey, like I messed this up because I didn't read the instructions. Well, you made the instructions, you know what I mean? Like, so, like they're right there on the table. Like you scan the QR code, and if you forget something, like sometimes I'll come in and I forgot how to use the laser and which files to pull up to laser parts when I come in late at night to help out. And, I just go, I scan the QR code, and then I can look at the process in just a PDF form and, refresh myself on how to do it.
I think that's really going to, right now we're working on essentially like a massive poster board that's going to go on the wall of the shop. And it's going to be a flow down of like, from when we get the file from the customer to when we ship the part, here's all of the Gemba doc reference codes that you need to complete each step. And you shouldn't move forward till you've completed each step. And then, like for us creating a training documentation for future employees, that's been one of the best things about having our first employee is like, hey, here's all the things that we don't know that an employee could like issues an employee could cause us.
You don't realize until you have an employee how many things can go wrong.
And he's as green as they get. Like we took him from working like at Five Guys. Like he has never seen a machine in his life. And today, like he's cutting steel, aluminum. I can just give him a part and like, I'm like, hey, I need this finished by the end of the week. And he's got to like ship. He's got the Gemba doc on how to like ship it to the customer. Here's like what the packaging materials are. Here's here's the customer to contact, or here's the vendor to contact, and then for him to update it in the ERP. So us integrating a lot together, that's like some of the biggest things we're doing for our business.
Still a work in progress, it's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, his other question was, what are the things you're most worried and most excited about in the next year or two?
I think try not to worry too much. Like we worried a lot when we were starting the business, and it was always like, where's the next job coming from, or I think, once you build that customer base, it's and you maintain those relationships, it's a lot less stress on like, hey, where's the next job coming from? But I think if I worried about anything, it'd probably be, what if we have a lot of growth next year, and it's like, which decision do we make? Do we grow a lot, or do we hire more people? Do we, and it's kind of like one of those in the moment, like make the decision and go for it.
At a time like that, what we do is we've got a conference room, and we just come in the conference room, like don't allow anyone to come in, and we just whiteboard it out till we figure it out. And we're just like, okay, here's the list of all the pros and cons. Here's the things that'll benefit us the most. And then usually we'll just tackle the lowest hanging fruit.
Okay. And then what about most excited for in the next year or two?
I'd say growth too. Like, it's exciting and nerve wracking. We've taken on a couple new customers who are doing more aerospace work. And like just seeing like what the potential is out there. So I think just it's exciting to see. There's a lot of different there's a lot of different companies out there that are working on really cool stuff. The SpaceX of the world, and the like all the different drone companies that are out there, Anduril, and like it's really cool to see, and like we want to be a part of that. So I'm just excited to work with our current customers and bring on new customers and see kind of what is out there for us.
Awesome. Well, as I'm sure you anticipated, a lot of the other questions we got from Instagram were about the Haeberle. So let's dive into it. Why you picked it, what you love most, how it changed your workflow. I think we've had everybody ask everything about it. So just give me the highlights, the lowlights. Someone mentioned chip conveyors, give us everything.
Yeah, the Haeberle is, as far as freeing up time, that's what it's done for us. And during the day, it's me and one employee. So I'm running a long bed, he's running the medium bed, and then the Haeberle is like, we're both like loading it or prepping the next job to go on it. So we'll run anything from, 10 parts to a couple thousand parts on the Haeberle. And a lot of the stuff we do is mix where it's like, hey, I need, 10 sets of these parts for this system. And I need them, I don't need them in 3 months. I need them in a month. And I need you to deliver X amount per month. And so the Haeberle gives you is the flexibility to switch between different part styles, and then the additional tool magazine and, having 60 pallets really gives you like, hey, I'm going to load up half of this with this part number. And then I'm going to work on setting up my next part for the fall league. So like a lot of what we do is like we'll spend a whole day doing the prototype and we'll run like one or two of the different parts. So if it's two parts that need to go together, like a clamshell half of like electronic housing, we'll run the top and the bottom, at least the op 10 of the top and the bottom on the Haeberle, prove it out, and then run, like 10 of them, and then say we need to run 400 of each. What we'll do is, we'll just set up one, let it start running, and then prep all the tools and everything. Or if we've done all the prototypes in the morning, then all the tools will just be offloaded by the robot arm. And then as soon as it's done with one, you can just schedule it to switch over, and it just grabs all the tools, shuffles them in, and starts on the next one.
So how did you even get down the route of looking at Haeberles? Because you just said you were looking at C42s.
Oh, yeah. So
there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions about Haeberles. Sean posted that video of like the $700,000 robo drill, and people just
Sean
like lost their minds.
The clickbait. Yeah.
Yeah. So get, how did you find them? How did that get in the running? How did you make that financial decision? All of that stuff.
I think, actually it was a year before we had the one customer with the aftermarket parts had, was talking about scaling up and doing more monthly with us. So we were doing about like 500 parts a month, and it was enough that one or two people with two machines could get it done, relatively quickly. But then, once you're getting to like 1,500, 2,000 parts, it becomes a big time sink where you have an operator at the machine every, 20, 30 minutes reloading a pallet by pallet. And it's just not something like we need to free up operator time to work on more important things. And so we went and looked at methods, and we looked at the different options. There's like the Plus E, which loads material. There's the Plus K. They have a Plus Big K. They have a Plus Big E now.
Plus Big K Duo.
Yeah, Plus Big K Duo. There's just so many different variants, and they just kind of scale exponentially in price. But we saw the Plus K. We did some demos with it, and we were slowly growing with that customer. I think towards the end of the following year, we went back. We're like, hey, we need another machine. We were going to buy just another long bed with a fourth axis on it, just load pallets by hand. And they still had that same demo machine there in the showroom at Methods in Charlotte. So we're like, hey, how much do you want for this thing? And they ended up cutting us a really sweet deal on that machine, and it was just the right timing, the right place. We were like a couple days away from signing on a Haeberle machine, and that machine became available. We're like, hey, we went in our conference room. We kind of laid out all the pros and cons, like where's the business right now? Like, do we need to buy this really expensive machine? Like, what percentage of our customer base has this size of part? Like, what type of new work could we take on if we got the C42? We're doing like billets that are like 20 by 12 by 3, and they're like carbon tooling, and a lot of that's done on the long bed. So we're like, okay, well, we're getting a lot of this work, and we're having to turn away a lot of this work because we don't have the size of machine to do it. But it does require more than just purchasing the machine. Like, you have to change like your workflow. You have to change your tooling. Now you have to add a whole new set of tooling. So like, put it in a spreadsheet, calculate how much is it going to cost you, calculate what your like potential ROI is, and like that's the easiest way to make the next decision on like where you're moving, and then also like where your customer base is going. Like, if you can just reach out to them by phone, like, hey,
what kind of projects do you have in the work? Is there anything you would potentially have for us coming up in the next like few months or year? And if they're starting to send you higher volumes of something, then maybe they're leaning towards production. And even though like we would like to do mostly production, like you have to do the prototypes to really get to production work.
Right. So what would you say to people who say like, oh, that's just a very expensive robo drill? Why would you spend that much on a robo drill?
I mean, it's not. It's not as expensive as you think. I think it's not $800,000. I mean, we also.
I think your starting price is around like 450, and that gets you like just kind of like foot in the water, probably out the door, like with stuff to be able to operate. It depends on how long you want to operate too, because like there's a lot of variables like your coolant filling, your coolant filtering, like chip management. How long do you want to stay away from the machine? Is the machine going to run all weekend? Then you're probably going to have to refill the tank. So the things we've been looking to is like coolant refill, coolant management. Because like if you're running thousands of parts through your machine, your coolant's going to go bad like so quick. Like especially if you don't have really good filtering. And then you also have to think about carry off. Like you have a lot of chip carry off. Yeah, so there's like just so like it like that machine can quickly get to 800,000. It just depends on type of work you're doing. But always remember, like you can put your foot in the water and then upgrade as you go. It's just not always going to be the most cost effective at the time. But if you have the customer that's heading in that direction, you might as well do it up front. We went this time around. We went with like pretty much every option that comes with like radio probes, laser, tool touch, LNS, conveyor, high pressure coolant, 1000 psi coolant. And the LNS has been really good, and working with that company has been really good. Pretty much like bend over backwards to make sure you're happy. And but we're looking at different options. Like we want to be able to run a week at a time. And like to get there, it just takes a lot of experience. Like you have to just like figure out the unknown or the unknown unknowns. And that, you have to take a step. So like, whether it's, we're very like, we think that part loading is like applicable for certain types of situations. Like if you're running tens of thousands of one part number, like it makes sense just because like that much fixturing and tooling is a lot of cost. And then you have to think about degradation of that fixturing and tooling over time and replenishment costs. So like all of that has to go into your initial quote. Otherwise you're going to get screwed on the back end.
Totally. Yeah. So you brought up chip management. How has chip management been conveyor wise, getting it out of the machine, carry off, all that? I think that seems to be a common thread amongst my guests of that is like the pitfall of many automated systems. So talk to me about everything involved there.
I think I come in at night and I load the machine for the night runs, and a lot of the time it's like the coolant tank's down, or you got like a lot of fines. You got to clean the grates in the back. And fines are like the hardest thing when you're running just purely aluminum. The fines will build up. The coolant turns gray. It affects the surface finish when or the filters going up to the wash down, clog up. So, just making sure you have a maintenance schedule on the side of the machine. We got, a schedule that you write down the maintenance items that are daily, weekly, and you sign them off. And just making sure somebody's keeping up with it. That machine, it will just keep running as long as you keep feeding it. That's the best part about that thing. And it's like you can't feed it fast enough. That's the problem.
Right now, like we'll operate anywhere between 16 and 18 hours. So, when we leave at the end of the day, so it runs through the day, and then we load it, which takes about an hour and a half, and then we leave for the day, and it'll run till the morning, and then usually Skylar will come in at night, load it, and then me or our employee will load it in the morning, and then we'll kind of do our morning meeting while everything's running, and that's just kind of how like we get to the consistency. And that machine has been very reliable. it does matter how much chips you're taking off your part. Like, what's your part size? Are you loading like these large billets where you're going to remove 90% of the material? Then you need to think about like, you need to add options like curtain washdown, bed flush, maybe the type of conveyor that you go with. So initially we've had 2 versions of conveyors. So first we started with a scraper style Hennig. We were going to do a mix of parts, but that thing can't handle aluminum for anything.
It was like a hybrid scraper belt, and it would just not like, yeah, I mean, the aluminum would go straight back into the tank. Like, not even, it would just go past the grates.
Floats over the belt into the tank. So then the whole rear tank would just fill up with aluminum. And like, we're running pallets for like 3 hours a night. So like, we would come into the morning and the whole shop would just be flooded. And we did that about 7 times. And we're like, okay. And this was probably within 15 days of getting the system. And I reached back out to Hennig, and they sent us a bunch of engineering samples, kept saying it wasn't an issue. None of the engineering samples worked, and it was just, round and round and round.
It was a nightmare, but then we ended up, when we bought the Haeberle, we switched them out for the L&S, what are they, MH140, 140 micron. And those have been really good. You just got to clean the grates in the back, probably like once a day, if that. And we've run almost like a whole, we've gone a whole week without cleaning them, but every couple of days we'll change the grate, the filter, and there's just regular maintenance items. The thing is, when you're pulling coolant through the grate in the back, that keeps it from getting to like the high pressure pumps and the washdown pumps. You're pulling all that coolant through the fines, and it's just graying out the coolant, making less sludge. And that's where we started looking into other coolant management systems, like the JK system.
Yeah, we're looking at adding potentially another Haeberle cell next year. So we're looking at, okay, at what point do we need to upgrade like all of our coolant management? I think we could get away with another LNS adding like multi-stage filtration, cyclonic filtration. But the JK system kind of has all that, and it has like tank recirculation. So like no fine should ever settle down to the bottom of the tank. And I've recently spoke to a person that has 50 of these rubber drill machines with the JK systems on them, and they're doing like crazy high volume production for like Ford and these other big companies. So like that's another big thing we're thinking about is, okay, what's the next step as far as like filtration? How far down do we need to filtrate? What kind of flow do we need to the rear of the tank? Just so we don't overflow the belt part of the tank.
That JK system is wild. I've never heard of it before, but I just looked it up.
It is. We got the presentation on that thing, and it's impressive.
Yeah, the team there is like extremely knowledgeable, and like he took me through like a PhD level course on like coolants, like how like chips stick to the coolant, like how far you can filter down and all this stuff.
It's an expensive coolant tank though.
I bet. Yeah, looking at everything involved, I'm sure it's not cheap. That is neat though.
That, and I know you were looking into coolant refill, automatic coolant refill. Is that right?
Yeah, I was looking at Liquid Tool is the one so far that seems like they have their stuff mostly figured out, but I hate that it is a software as a service type deal where you're paying yearly for it. Like they give you the hardware and then you have to pay a year at a time or whatever. And
I think Cooling Guy has a system as well, right? They have like an autofill system.
I think so, yeah. I haven't looked too much at it.
I think at Hendrick, we were looking at that because we got a bunch of like EC400 machines that they're going to have in a line basically for production. And they wanted a way to keep those things running over the weekend. So looking at like autofill systems, I think that was one of the names that came up.
Yeah. It's tough. It's really tough because I know like the big benefit of the liquid tool one that I've been looking at is that it has like inline refractometer.
Yeah.
And so it's actively changing the coolant concentration at the barrel and making sure that it's mixing correctly and all that. That's
something a lot of the other companies don't have. At least with the JK system, they don't have the closed loop on refract, I don't think, and I don't think the coolant guide does either. It's just like a top off. Like you just set the percentage, it tops it off, and then you check it every day or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I think Eddie at Nueva has the liquid tool one, and I need to talk to him and bug him about it.
Probably pick his brain about it more.
Yeah. Rob was the one who pinged me on it first, and he was like, "You should look at this. It's expensive but good." And I was like, "All right, well, I'll check it out." But let's see. Other questions. Noosh was asking, for anyone who is wanting to do something similar but has little to no machine operating experience, what are some standout characteristics that make owners look for? What are some traits people look for when it comes to hiring someone to train to run machines? So what are the first steps someone who wants to work at a shop like yours should take?
I think the first thing you need to do is like just put a couple of their parts in their hand when you first have them come in or an interview or and just see how they react to it. Because like if someone doesn't really have the spark for it, they don't want to like make things, then it's hard to push them in that direction. Just because like the one thing we've seen with our employee is like we let him like bring his friends in to shop and like show them around and stuff. And as long as we're not doing NDA work, like I'll just let him like, hey, you can eat lunch here, whatever. And he gets like a big kick out of like showing people what he's doing. And that was like a big thing for us. We're like, hey, like he has like the itch for doing this. We need to empower him in any way possible, whether it's like documentation, like give him every type of resource so he can just like go gung ho on manufacturing. And, he like a lot of the thing we've seen in him is like, he follows like as much as like Titan is like the influencer guy, like he does like follow him. And it is good to see that start to influence manufacturing. And we do need that side of manufacturing just to get like the spark like under people.
Totally.
Like, most of these people don't even know what like an end mill is. Like any type of information like we can get out to the public, it's like,
Yeah, he started like watching the Saunders videos, and like I told him to listen to the Within Tolerance podcast, and he's picked it up. And so really, I think we've actually interviewed a couple like skilled, like trained machinists, and we didn't hire those people because, they were either machine operators or like, they didn't have that spark we're looking for. Like, hey, they're really interested in doing this. They're not just looking for a job. There's a lot of those type of people. And I'd rather teach somebody, it's very hard teaching somebody from the ground up. Costly. But, you'd rather have that employee who's excited, somebody who's excited to be there to make, who's really invested in learning the trade versus somebody who's already been in the trade and kind of maybe has, bringing their, their kind of salty opinions or like bad habits with them. It's kind of like a clean slate.
Totally. Yeah. It's almost impossible to train attitude. You can train somebody on the actual machining part, but like getting them interested, they either are or they aren't.
Yeah, especially for like we got our employees Gen Z, so we're trying to learn all the terminology. So
trying to stay up with the times.
Yeah. Those guys are going to just need a different sort of motivation to get them into this trade.
So did he apply, or did he know of you guys through
he knew of us through a family friend, and he wanted to work for us for a while, and we're just like, hey, we're not ready for an employee yet. And when we started looking for an employee, when we were getting a lot of this new work in, you know, we weren't even looking. We're like, hey, we need someone who knows what they're doing. But then we realized, like, you know, you'll have to, you can't just like incrementally step someone up. And you know, we didn't really need a whole lot of help with the machining side of things. We needed help with like shipping things, getting things out the door, documentation. We had just moved like we were renting the back 1,000 square feet of the shop, and now we took over all 4,400 square feet, and so we needed help like resetting up the shop. You know, we were getting air installed and racks up, and so he started with a lot of those things before he even, you know, started on a machine.
And he would like go up to the machines like while he was like cleaning or whatever, like asking about like, what does this thing do? Like move up and down. And like I was like, you want to just like play around with it for a while? Like and so like we just kind of like let him run with it, and you know, had him program his first parts. Like having Skylar was a big benefit because I could keep the shop running while Skylar was training him. So, you know, if you can have other resources to to give you just additional hand in training, because you still need to get parts out the door, right? Like you got to keep the business going, got to keep the dollars flowing. So
we had him do the Titans of CNC Academy, and then you know, a lot of YouTube, like the YouTube Academy, right? Like there's a lot of information out there, and it's so easy to learn. And he even was coming back with like, he would go home and he'd be like researching it on his own and come back with questions. And that's how you know you have the right person, is, you know, they're interested in it more than just a job.
And
I completely agree. Yeah.
And at first, like he was making a ton of mistakes. I think in the first 2 weeks, it cost us about $6,000. And just because he broke, you know, he like destroyed an entire job, broke the probe. But like, I was like, hey, it's okay, but don't do it again. And just kind of like your story, like your boss told you, just get this one off your plate so I can trust you. And it's like that right there has empowered him to like actually go and like walk through all the steps. And not only that, but we didn't have any documentation. So like there was no steps for him to follow.
Right.
We just went in there and said, okay, Skylar and I are going to go in here. We're going to document everything. And now he has like a workflow of how to do a job, how to program. You know, he has templates to program on. I had him go through and like make his own tool library. You know, and then he's got a chance to do like aluminum, steel, stainless, some plastics, and just getting him in front of everything first, just so we can like figure out like where he struggles. And that's kind of like, okay, now I can like kind of funnel more of these other jobs towards him. And he's actually starting to make us a profit, which is great. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like at first it was definitely cost us money. We're like, hey, this is an investment. You know, he has zero experience. But you know, he has like the yearn to do this. And
Right.
that right there is like totally worth the couple $1,000s I had to spend to get him up to speed. So,
And he's been with you how long?
Since beginning of August.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty quick.
he's really neat.
Yeah, he's very green, but I mean, he can take a 3-axis part, machine it, and pack it, ship it without any intervention. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's automation right there.
Yeah.
Just through a person. You know, that's
And
amazing.
we hope to scale it out this year by like adding more people, adding like more process, more documentation. I don't think we could do it without more documentation.
Totally. Well, yeah, that brings us on to shop news and new things. What else is new in your world?
Oh man. So with one of our new customers, we're doing a lot of like tight tolerance sensor housings for these aerospace parts. And it's just like it's a 2 clamshell part that has a lot of really tight features on it. And we're realizing like, hey, we did the first run off of like a couple hundred parts, and they want to go to full rate production and take it off of another shop that is going out of business or closing up. And so we're like, okay, how do we scale this? We bought the Trimos. We've been inspecting the parts with that, and it's good enough, but it's, you know, basically like a single axis CMM. And but like, how do you inspect 1,000 parts? Or what do you do there? And so we've been looking into just scaling up. We bought a lot of just manual inspection equipment this year, and now we're looking at like a Zeiss CMM, at least a bed big enough that we can put a bunch of parts on and measure them in the same fashion that our customer measures them. So that's kind of like where we would see things going in the near future. And then potentially like with that customer is the new machine to go along with it.
So would that just be a duplicate of the one you already have?
We're looking at the machine that Methods brought to IMTS. So it's the Plus K 60 Max, which has I think 96 pallets and 92 tools. So just additional capacity, and then you've got the 28 tool head, so slightly more tools. Right now we don't like really max out the head because we do a lot of stuff where like we'll drill and interpolate. I think that's the next big move, and then with that, the new conveyors and
documentation. I feel like we've talked about that. It's like to make a scalable business, we're just trying to make sure we have enough documentation that we can easily train new employees and really make a business that doesn't require us to run it. So
that's amazing. Yeah, documentation I think is something I'm very weak on, and is going to be a big 2025 push for me, because I've even noticed it just between Brad and I, where like we'll both specialize in certain little things, right, and then one of us will have to do it and be like, I don't know how to, can you hold my hand? Like, I don't know how to do this. So I think it's worth repeating over and over because it is so important. Well, guys, that brings me to the last few questions I ask every guest every week. First up, what are you guys researching? Doesn't have to be manufacturing related, but what's been popping up in your browser?
Yeah, a lot of like we had a meeting with Zeiss a couple weeks ago. So a lot of CMM software, industrial wash. So like how do you wash 1,000 parts a month? Like we're doing it by hand right now, and it's like an absolute nightmare. So just kind of like we've looked into like, do we do like a wash large ultrasonic or a large almost like kitchen industrial dishwasher style. So there's a lot of different options out there. We didn't get the chance to go to IMTS this year and like kind of look at what other options are out there, but we were just like so busy with work. It was crazy, but I would have liked to
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
I see like Juan, he just recently got like a wash station. I forget what it's called, but it had like a submersion bed that goes down into the.
So maybe something like that. We're just whatever works for our application. If you got any suggestions, please drop it in our DMs.
Yeah. Well, I was going to tell you, we looked at Crest Ultrasonic makes what are they called? Solvent vapor degreasers. So they actually use like a relatively non-toxic, non-flammable solvent that they boil, and the vapors degrease your parts and clean them, and they ultrasonic them as well, and then they come out completely dry and clean. And
is it safe on aluminum? Like, doesn't etch?
Yeah, it's supposed to be completely safe, at least according to them. And they've got a bunch of different size machines. You can use isopropyl if you want. You just have to buy like the one that's explosion proof because reasons. But Brad, they had a small one at his last job, and he really liked it over the cleaning cell because it was so much quicker and so much more. It was just like one-stop shop. You throw parts in, it does all 4 of the cycles, and they come out dry and clean and warm and ready to package, basically.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how long it takes to like blow parts off after they're wet. It's like, okay, I'm spending an hour just blowing all these parts off.
Yeah, because you're just blowing it around in circles. You like blow off one face and you're like, great. And then you turn it over and you're like, damn it, it's wet again. And you blow that face off, and round and round you go. I'll send you guys the info, the PDFs that they sent us after IMTS, though, because they seemed pretty neat.
Sweet. Yeah, I think the other thing was creating a handbook for employees, especially if we want to hire more people. I think that's just making sure like it's kind of crystal clear on like what's expected, what, you know, like any company, you have a handbook, right? Like you work at a big company, you got to go through the handbook, sign off that you've like, you've read and understand like, hey, these are the expectations. These are
The dress code.
the things, the things that you want to operate like a real business. Then, that's something that we need is, it's just a employee handbook of some sort we can give to new people.
Yeah, we
Totally. I
recently
mean, you can't fire somebody for not obeying laws
Right,
that are not there.
not
right?
obeying something that's there's no handbook.
That's like, we kind of like, wow, that, like he's kind of, our employees like doing something we don't want to do, but we haven't like, there's no document that says he can't do it. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Another thing we added was ADP time tracking, just so like we can keep track of like schedule, days off, holidays, and then clock time just in the shop. So
Yeah, that's something I have never thought about because we don't have an employee,
Right.
but that is something
Right,
we'd have
yeah.
to figure out for
It's
sure.
all new to us, so we're just trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the hard part of being a small business and hiring your first employee is like, again, those unknown unknowns. You're just like, oh, that's right. We need a way to track his time.
Right.
Shoot. Yeah, for sure. So on here, I have the things that to be a better person, leader, employer. Happy to dive into those, but also I've been asking 2 other questions. So yeah, let's do this one first. What are you guys working on to be a better person, leader, employer, what have you?
Yeah, just understanding communication styles, and like you gotta give your employee the best way to communicate with you and understand their best way of communicating. Just so like that right there reduces a lot of any friction like between you during the day. And once we've done that, it's really just like the workflow during the day is like really easy. It's like we're just kind of like chatting, shooting the shit, like um and we're getting parts out the door. So it's like it's very like low stress, and we want to keep it that way. And I know Skylar has done like a lot of stuff with Hendrick recently that I think are going to implement. Just figuring out like people's different types of communication styles, and that's important if you want to grow a company.
Yeah, like I can give some
Communication.
backstory. Like at Hendrick, we use the MBS system, so it's called Management by Strengths, and this is like a lot of the Fortune 500 companies use it, and then the military as well. But it's just a way of understanding people's communication styles and temperaments. And so when you have like Hendrick Automotive, Mr. H, he owns dealerships across the country, and there's 100 locations. It's the largest privately held dealership in the country. And when you have 10,500 employees, you got to make sure that you are hiring a lot of the right people. And so if you look in the MBS handbook that they train all these companies with, Mr. H and our companies is quoted in there because we're one of the biggest users of MBS. And so we really want to kind of trickle that down into our own company because we've learned a lot from the culture. Well, I've learned a lot from the culture there, and why it's such a winning culture and why they're so successful is really, it stems from the way that they put people together. Mr. H is like, one of the best at putting the right people with the right teams. And so, 14 championships, some of the best, cup drivers, you got everybody from Jimmy Johnson to Jeff Gordon, 7 championships. And, you don't win those by chance. And so there was actually a story behind that. They call it the milk and cookies conversation. And this was between the crew chief and Jimmy Johnson, who was at the time that hadn't won a championship yet. And Mr. H called them both up to the office, and they had been butting heads for weeks on just communication. And this is actually where the whole MBS kind of started. Was Mr. H sat him down and like pulled out a plate of cookies and some milk, and like, here, boys, you're going to sit here and talk this through until you figure it out. And, they went on to win 7 championships, but it was because of the level of communication that they're able to have within the team, and understanding each person within the team and how they like to be communicated with as well as to communicate. So MBS is kind of like one of those personality tests where you have different strengths and weaknesses, right? You have DEPS, which is directness, extroversion, pace, and structure. And people who are high in one of those traits are different color, like red, green, yellow. And so understanding how to communicate with people based on what their strengths are, like high in E. So I like somebody who's, as well as high in directness. So somebody who is very direct with me and just communicates verbally. And I understand that better versus somebody who's like high in structure and high in directness, where they want like an email with all the details and everything spelled out. And so I think understanding, taking that kind of into our own company and understanding our employees. I'm going to get Nick and Ty to do it this week because I had just finished my training last week on this, but I would encourage anybody to do a similar test or even MBS if they want to like understand, how you communicate. Maybe you and Brad could do it at some point, like, see what your guys' communication strengths are, but I'm sure you figured it out with this long of working together.
You butt heads enough with anybody and you'll figure out how to communicate.
Right, yeah. Like, Nick and I don't always get along, and like, working with your brother, it's hard enough as it is with family because it's so easy to just be like, hey, I can treat them like however, because they're just family. They're going to get over it. But even for us working together, just understanding like, hey, how to communicate better. I think that's how we can become better employers, and better people. Just first diving in and understanding that.
Totally. So you guys said that your employee is Gen Z. Do you have any tips on how to communicate with a Gen Z employee and make them understand? Oh
man, one of the big things, he's a big video game nerd, like loves video games. We grew up on video games, and I think finding some common ground with your employee, it just makes the conversations easier. You can kind of like, we talk a lot about video games we used to play, and like we have a lot of different things in common. And he's very much more open to criticism and things about like work when you kind of get him on a playing field where he's comfortable talking. And so, finding that common ground first is probably more important than it is just talking about things directly.
And a lot of the time, it's not really a criticism. It's just like, hey, like, what can we do to help you get better? We're not trying to like break you down or tell you like what you're doing wrong. It's just like, hey, what can we provide to you to make it easier for you to do the right thing?
Is there anything besides just documentation that he's asked for that you would think would be helpful for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, like it is documentation, but it's the style of documentation. Like we let him do a lot of documentation because it's like it's in his own style. And then, like if we're going to hire more people, they're probably going to be like around his age,
in their mid 20s to 30s.
Right.
So what does that look like on your guys' side? Do you teach him and then have him immediately go and replicate and make the documentation, or how do you flow that
with
down
him
correctly?
Through the documentation as he's making it? Like,
okay,
or we like, hey, let's review what the Gemba doc says that you just wrote for operating the tumbler or loading the pallets for the Haeberle system, and we can go back through the steps and correct. Or say, hey, we probably need more detail on this step because like it's like the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, deal. Like, do I put like the bread or like the peanut butter first? Like, what do I do? And so, kind of making the documentation as easy to read as possible.
Okay, and that's awesome.
He's also like an email guy, so like if I lay down an email, he will. Or so like we have just a big monitor in the shop, like a TV. And it just has a list of tasks. So like if he's out of machining jobs and he needs something else to do, it's, hey, here's the task. And then here's all the reference codes for him to operate the task. And, he's very like, hey, if it's there, like he will just like knock it out throughout the day. And he'll go like, I'll be like, oh, this will like take him like a week to finish, and he'll be done in 3 days. I'll be like, okay. It's great because like he's one of those guys that's like, he just wants a list of things to do and just to get them done. And as long as he's got documentation, he can knock it out.
That's super cool. That sounds incredibly valuable. You guys really lucked out, I think.
Yeah. I know it won't always be that easy. So, developing a structure is going to be a big thing.
Right. So the last question, give me a win and a lesson from this week that you can share.
Ooh, from this week.
Or the last couple weeks.
Okay.
I think this kind of goes with the other one. Like last year, this time we were really like we were working through Christmas. We're like just in a not in the best financial location, and we've done really well this year. We have done more profit with less people. Like it was basically Nick and I. Now it's Nick and Ty doing most of the work, but we've turned a bigger profit this year with less people by implementing all these different, small things. Like we had our eyes fixed on that new shiny machine, but there's a lot more important things that we need to fix with the business to make it more profitable. And so
we actually took on less jobs too.
We took on less jobs as well. And I think that was just a big win, is like we were able to take shut down for a full 8 days for Christmas, give employee bonuses, and be able to just like have a stress-free holiday. That's been a huge win for us, and just the mental health that I can look at myself and my mental state a year ago was pretty awful. I know we've been trying to do this podcast for a really long time.
Yeah, that's on me though.
We all have like things going on, and we're either too busy or like you're busy or and it was just like this time last year would have been an awful time to do it. Yeah. So we were just in a state of just scrambling to get jobs finished. So yeah, just that's a huge win. It's just being able, like all the things kind of coming together this past couple of weeks.
That's killer. Yeah, when I think that's not only a win, but a big lesson too, is not only you got to take time off, like if just mental health wise, like you said, last year, this time you were not feeling good.
Not in a good mental state.
Yeah. And that, documentation and having processes really frees you up to do that is pretty amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad like you said, that we could finally make this happen.
Yeah,
We've
definitely
been planning this for probably a month or two at this point, and I really, really appreciate the time.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And, we've been longtime listeners of the podcast. We've listened to every episode, and what you guys are doing for the community, I think, is probably, one of the best things out there. You bring a lot of people together, and just through the podcast, we've met people that we now work with as partner shops. We've heard tons of information that we glean from you and Chris shooting the shit every week. Like just, all the different little things, like those little, kind of golden nuggets of information are really important for the community. And so, we just wanted to say thank you for that.
Yeah. If we're going to revitalize, American manufacturing, we need a lot more people in this thing. And, this is going to be one of the things that does it. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. Thanks to new Patreon members, Alexander, Damian, Jared, Travis, True Focus Fab, and Tim Paul for supporting the show, because I can send mics to people like Nick and Skylar, so you guys get good audio. Thank you all for listening, and I will be back next week.